Welcome. Today we're diving into the extraordinary life of Sophie Tucker, the last of the Red Hot Mamas. From humble beginnings in Ukraine to becoming a trailblazing entertainment icon, her story is one of resilience, talent, and breaking boundaries. Let's get started. Although Sophie Tucker achieved iconic status as the last of the Red Hot Mamas, few people are aware of the profound sacrifices she made for fame or the painful secret she left behind in her hometown, a story we'll delve into later. Sophie, originally named Sophia Kalish, was born in 1886 in what is now Ukraine. Her life was marked by drama and upheaval from the very start. Shortly after her birth, her family was forced to flee their homeland under the cover of night, escaping dangerous circumstances. Their perilous journey took them across continents and an ocean before they finally arrived in Boston in 1887. Yet despite traveling such a vast distance to seek safety and a new beginning, the family found that their past continued to haunt them. The weight of their former lives and the reasons for their flight would remain an indelible part of their story as they tried to rebuild in America. Upon arriving in America, the Tucker family had to take even more extreme measures to ensure their past remained hidden. As it turned out, Sophie Tucker's father had abandoned his post in the Imperial Russian Army, likely fleeing due to the family's strong commitment to their Jewish faith and traditions, a combination that made them a target in their homeland. To obscure their identity and avoid pursuit by authorities, they changed their surname to Abusa, hoping to sever any trail leading back to their origins. This desperate move marked the beginning of a new chapter for the family, one fraught with challenges, but also opportunities. When Sophie was about 8 years old, her family relocated to Hartford, Connecticut, where they opened a modest establishment called Abusa's Home Restaurant. While the family focused on running their business, Sophie began to reveal a remarkable talent that would soon outshine the restaurant itself. Standing in the doorway, she would sing to passers-by in an effort to draw them in. Even at such a young age, her voice carried a dramatic flair that captivated everyone who heard it. It quickly became unclear whether people were coming to enjoy a meal or simply to hear the young girl's compelling performances. Sophie's singing turned the family restaurant into a lively and popular hotspot in Hartford. Inspired by the growing attention her voice brought, and fueled by dreams of a bigger future, she began entering amateur singing contests. Her charm and talent made her an instant favorite among audiences who would cheer enthusiastically for her, often calling out for the fat girl to perform. It was a bold and bittersweet initiation into the world of entertainment, as these experiences gave Sophie her first intoxicating taste of fame. However, just as her career began to gain traction, an impulsive decision made during her teenage years caused a major setback. This pivotal moment threatened to derail the promising future that had seemed within her reach, marking the beginning of a series of dramatic twists in her life and career. In 1903, when Sophie Tucker was just 16 years old, she made a spontaneous and fateful decision to elope with a car driver named Louis Tuck. The motivations behind this hasty marriage remain unclear. Perhaps it was youthful infatuation or a desperate desire for independence. But what is certain is that Sophie's secret could not remain hidden for long. When she returned home, her parents, though likely dismayed by their daughter's impulsiveness and her choice of a partner with limited prospects, decided to formalize the union. They arranged an orthodox wedding ceremony for the young couple, ensuring the marriage was respectable even if it wasn't wise. This, however, was only the beginning of Sophie's turbulent early years. Shortly after marrying Louis, she discovered that she was pregnant. In 1905, at just 18 years old, she gave birth to her only child, a son named Albert. While this milestone might have marked the start of a stable family life for many, It quickly became a source of stress and unhappiness for Sophie. She was still practically a child herself, and the demands of motherhood, combined with the challenges of her marriage, proved overwhelming. The reality of life with Louis Tuck soon became unbearable. As Sophie had feared, her husband had little to offer in terms of financial stability, and the grinding poverty of their existence only amplified her frustrations. Meanwhile, the monotony of her domestic life left her feeling trapped and stifled, driving her to the brink of despair. Instead of finding solace in her new role as a wife and mother, Sophie began to see her life as a nightmare of her own making. It was during this difficult time that Sophie had a profound realization. The life she was living wasn't the one she wanted. She didn't aspire to be a devoted wife or a nurturing mother. Her true calling was something far greater. Sophie longed to be an entertainer, to use her talents to achieve the fame and success she had only dreamed of. With this newfound clarity, she made the bold and irreversible decision to leave her husband and son behind, embarking on a journey that would change her life forever. She was determined to stop at nothing to achieve her dream of becoming a star. After giving birth to her son Albert, Sophie made the heart-wrenching decision to leave her husband and entrust her child to the care of her family. Determined to pursue her dream, she set her sights on New York City. But what awaited her there was a fresh set of challenges, ones she had not anticipated. Armed with a letter of recommendation from Willie Howard, a prominent performer of the time, Sophie arrived in the bustling city hoping it would be her springboard to fame. However, the letter did little to open doors for her. Most venues were hesitant to give her a chance, citing her lack of experience and unconventional appearance. Faced with rejection after rejection, Sophie found herself in a predicament that felt all too familiar. Much like her days singing at her family's restaurant to attract customers, she began performing in small cafes and beer gardens, often singing simply for food or tips. The glamorous future she had envisioned seemed a distant reality as she struggled to make ends meet. Despite her hardships, Sophie's connection to her family back in Connecticut never wavered. Even while she was barely earning enough to survive, she consistently sent a significant portion of her meager earnings home to provide for her young son. This unyielding sense of responsibility made her sacrifices even more poignant. In 1907, Sophie finally managed to secure a proper debut on stage at an amateur night, and her talent began to draw some attention. However, the struggle was far from over. One promoter, recognizing her potential but worried about her unconventional appearance, expressed a cruel concern. He feared that audiences would find her too big and ugly to succeed. This devastating critique marked yet another obstacle in her path, but Sophie's journey was far from over. She would soon find a way to turn even her supposed shortcomings into her greatest assets. The manager believed that Sophie Tucker's unconventional looks could be concealed with the help of some face paint. He offered her a regular spot on his team, but only if she agreed to perform in blackface, a degrading practice rooted in racial stereotypes. Desperate for work and running out of options, Sophie reluctantly accepted the offer. While the gig provided her with a steady income, the emotional toll was immense. Sophie despised the act and the caricature she was forced to portray. It was a deeply personal humiliation, and the shame weighed on her, especially during tours that brought her close to Connecticut. She kept her performances a secret from her family, unwilling to let them witness the indignity she endured. After years of enduring this degrading role, Sophie finally reached her breaking point. Determined to reclaim her dignity, she devised a brilliant and subversive plan. During her performances, she began incorporating a comedic yet revealing act that cleverly mocked the absurdity of the role she was forced to play. She would slowly remove a glove mid-performance, revealing her white skin underneath. Then, with dramatic flair, she would take off her wig to unveil her natural blonde hair. This routine not only left audiences roaring with laughter, but also exposed the artificiality and absurdity of the racist performance she had been coerced into adopting. The audience adored it, and her clever humor turned the entire farce on its head. Still, this was not the act Sophie truly wanted to perform. Her opportunity to break free from this role came unexpectedly before a major show in Boston. According to the official account, Sophie's makeup was lost during transit, leaving her with no choice but to perform as herself. However, many believe she intentionally misplaced her makeup, seizing the moment to shed the degrading mask once and for all. Whatever the truth, the night marked a turning point in her career. Sophie stepped onto the stage in a deliberately ill-fitting outfit, a dress too tight for her figure, and heels that were too high, creating a comical visual that immediately disarmed the audience. When she stumbled, as she had planned, the crowd erupted in laughter. Seizing the moment, she quipped, "Hey, what are you laughing at?" "I'm doing the best I can." Her wit, combined with her confidence, won the crowd over entirely. From that moment on, Sophie realized the very thing that made her managers anxious, her larger-than-life presence and physicality, could be her greatest strength. Leaning into her newfound persona, Sophie crafted a unique act that celebrated her individuality. Her humor became her trademark, complemented by her powerful voice. Songs like "I Don't Want to Get Thin" and "Nobody Loves a Fat Girl," but "Oh, How a Fat Girl Can Love" showcased her ability to embrace and transform societal expectations with charm and wit. Audiences across the country couldn't get enough, and her success skyrocketed. Sophie's talents eventually earned her a spot in the prestigious Ziegfeld Follies, one of the most famous entertainment acts of the time. She quickly became a standout star, delighting audiences with her racy humor and vibrant stage presence. However, not everyone celebrated her rise. Sophie's non-traditional appeal and ability to captivate the spotlight stirred resentment among the other performers, many of whom conspired to undermine her. Despite her overwhelming popularity and the substantial revenue she brought in, jealousy among her peers created powerful enemies who would stop at nothing to push her out of the troupe. The women in the Ziegfeld Follies found themselves consumed by envy, as Sophie Tucker, who did not fit the typical mold of a Follies performer, quickly stole the spotlight from them. Her larger-than-life persona, undeniable talent, and unique appeal were too much for them to handle, and they conspired to push her out. Their efforts succeeded when they pressured management to remove Tucker from the troupe. However, Sophie was not one to be defeated so easily, and she soon had her revenge in a way that left her detractors regretting their actions. In the audience during one of her performances was William Morris, a theater owner and a rising powerhouse in American entertainment. Morris saw what the Follies had failed to recognize. Sophie Tucker was too big of a star to share the stage with anyone else. With his backing, Sophie recorded a series of songs, and as expected, they became instant hits. Her music propelled her to nationwide fame, allowing her to tour extensively and captivate audiences across the country. Her infectious personality and natural charisma made her a favorite wherever she went. Sophie also proved to be a savvy marketer. After her performances, she would set up a table to sell copies of her autobiography, turning it into an extension of her act. If someone approached her stand and chose not to buy a book, Sophie would simply ignore them, knowing her worth and demanding respect for her work. For those who did purchase her autobiography, Sophie offered a unique and personal touch. She would engage her fans in honest conversations, often doling out marriage advice, and sharing personal anecdotes. She even collected their names and addresses to send them greeting cards whenever she visited their towns, creating a lifelong connection with her audience. While her career flourished, Sophie's personal life was far more turbulent. Her rise to fame coincided with the collapse of her first marriage, which ended in 1913. Although she officially divorced her husband, Louis Tuck, she chose to keep his surname, believing it sounded better for her burgeoning career. Sophie wasn't one to dwell on heartbreak for long, and by the same year, she had entered into a relationship with Frank Westville. Initially, they concealed their romantic involvement under the guise of a professional partnership, but the strain of their dynamic soon became apparent. As Sophie's star continued to rise, she outshone Westville both professionally and personally, creating friction in their relationship. To protect his fragile ego, Sophie agreed to share billing with him. But by 1916, it was clear that audiences were there to see Sophie, not Westville. Realizing he was overshadowed, Westville eventually withdrew from their act. Yet their relationship did not end there. In 1917, perhaps out of pity for his floundering career or in an attempt to stabilize their relationship, Sophie married Westville. The marriage, however, was doomed from the start. Westville's resentment over his secondary role only deepened after their wedding, reaching a breaking point in 1918 when he was drafted into the U.S. Army as a mechanic. Seizing the opportunity to escape their increasingly strained marriage, Westville filed for divorce the following year. Sophie was left alone once again, and the years that followed did not bring much improvement in her romantic life. It would be nearly a decade before Sophie entered another significant relationship, this time with her manager, Al Lackey. At first, their shared passion for show business seemed to make them a strong match, but the pattern repeated itself. Lackey, like her previous partners, struggled with being in the shadow of Sophie's immense talent and success. By 1934, their marriage ended in divorce as well. Reflecting on her romantic failures later in life, Sophie offered a poignant insight into the challenges of being an independent, successful woman. She acknowledged that many men found it difficult to accept a woman who carried her own suitcase and paid her own bills, lamenting that such independence often reduced her to the status of a pal in the eyes of potential partners. Though her love life was fraught with heartbreak, Sophie's reflections revealed a deep understanding of the cost of her success. She had risen to extraordinary heights, but her strength and ambition often came at the expense of her relationships. Sophie Tucker often reflected on the harsh reality she faced as a strong, financially independent woman in a time when such qualities were far from celebrated. She observed with candor that once a woman began carrying her own suitcase and paying her own bills, society, especially men, saw her differently. She lamented that these achievements often stripped women of their femininity in the eyes of others, relegating them to the role of a pal rather than a desirable partner. Despite this somber realization, Sophie was fortunate to cultivate some of the most meaningful friendships in the entertainment world, particularly with jazz legends and pioneering black musicians. These relationships were not only personally enriching, but also deeply influential in shaping Sophie's musical style. She drew inspiration from the jazz and blues traditions of her friends, incorporating their techniques and rhythms into her performances, which gave her music a unique and dynamic flair. However, her close ties with black artists occasionally placed her at odds with the societal norms of her era, leading to moments of conflict and confrontation. Beyond her friendship with Bill Robinson, Sophie Tucker also maintained strong ties with other prominent black artists of her time, such as Louis Armstrong, Ethel Waters, and Duke Ellington. These relationships were not only personal, but also professional, as she often collaborated with these trailblazers, learning from their unique styles and integrating elements of their music into her performances. Sophie was one of the few white performers of her era who openly acknowledged the influence of black musicians on her craft, often praising their talent in public interviews. This respect and camaraderie stood out in an industry and society rife with racial segregation. Her willingness to associate and work with black artists, even when it drew criticism, reflected her steadfast commitment to breaking down barriers and elevating talent regardless of race. One such incident occurred during an extravagant wedding Sophie hosted for her sister in New York. True to her inclusive nature, Sophie extended invitations to a diverse group of guests, including the iconic black musician Bill Bojangles Robinson, a beloved friend and a celebrated performer. While the guest list reflected Sophie's colorblind view of talent and friendship, it sparked outrage in the rigidly segregated society of the time. The controversy erupted when Robinson arrived at the venue. As he approached the entrance, the doorman stopped him and delivered an appalling instruction. All white guests could enter through the main doors, but Robinson would have to use the kitchen entrance. This blatant act of discrimination unfolded while Sophie herself was standing near the entryway, and her reaction was as swift as it was unforgettable. Unwilling to tolerate even a moment of such prejudice, Sophie turned to the doorman and delivered a sharp rebuke that left him utterly stunned. Her 6-word response, "Okay, everyone goes to the kitchen," made it clear that if Robinson couldn't enter through the front, then no one else would either. The incident not only highlighted Sophie's fierce commitment to equality, but also her willingness to stand against societal norms, even when doing so risked her own reputation. This moment epitomized the courage and defiance that defined Sophie Tucker's career and personal values. She was not merely an entertainer. She was a trailblazer who used her platform to challenge injustices, forging a legacy that extended far beyond her music. When the doorman uttered his discriminatory command, Sophie Tucker's response was nothing short of brilliant and decisive. Without missing a beat, she shot back with her now famous 6-word retort, "Okay, everyone goes to the kitchen." Her words were delivered with enough conviction and authority to halt the situation in its tracks, ensuring that her friend Bill Robinson, along with every other guest, would be treated equally. This defining moment underscored Sophie's unwavering stance against prejudice and her ability to use her quick wit and boldness to challenge societal injustices. By the late 1920s, however, the entertainment world around her was undergoing significant change. Vaudeville, once the pinnacle of American variety entertainment, was beginning to fade. Sophie herself recalled performing at the Palace Theater in New York City during its final days, a venue once revered as a temple of vaudeville. Reflecting on the somber atmosphere of that time, she remarked that the whole place, even the performers, stank of decay. Though vaudeville was clearly in its twilight years, Sophie refused to let herself fade with it. Her adaptability and business acumen enabled her to pivot gracefully into new opportunities. Sophie rebranded herself as the last of the Red Hot Mamas, a title that perfectly encapsulated her bold, larger-than-life persona. Embracing the changing landscape of entertainment, she transitioned from the vaudeville stage to other mediums, ensuring her continued relevance. Sophie explored radio and film, quickly becoming a recognizable figure in these burgeoning industries. Although her radio show was short-lived, her appearances on television during the 1950s and 1960s cemented her status as a beloved icon, introducing her to new generations of fans. Despite her enduring success and the friendships she cultivated with some of the most influential figures of her time, including royalty, Sophie's achievements came at a cost. Her fierce independence, relentless ambition, and the demands of a life in the spotlight left little room for personal fulfillment in her relationships. As the curtain began to fall on her remarkable career, Sophie's legacy was clear. She was a trailblazing performer, a master of reinvention, and a woman who had redefined what it meant to succeed in a male-dominated industry. Beyond her impact on the entertainment industry, Sophie Tucker also made notable contributions to social causes and philanthropic efforts. She was known for her generosity, frequently donating to Jewish charities and organizations that supported refugees and immigrants, a reflection of her own family's struggles as newcomers to America. During World War II, Sophie actively participated in fundraising efforts for war bonds and provided financial support to soldiers and their families. Moreover, she used her platform to champion social equality, whether by advocating for the inclusion of marginalized communities or hosting diverse events. Sophie consistently emphasized the importance of breaking down societal barriers. Her commitment extended to mentoring young artists, offering advice and resources to those aspiring to follow in her footsteps. Sophie's influence wasn't confined to the stage. She also left a legacy of compassion and advocacy that inspired many both within and beyond the entertainment world. Despite her remarkable career and larger-than-life persona, Sophie Tucker was unable to forge a close, loving bond with her son Albert, whom she had left in Connecticut many years earlier. Albert was effectively raised by Sophie's sister, who stepped into the maternal role that Sophie, caught up in her demanding and ambitious career, could not fulfill. Though she provided financial support, her involvement in Albert's life appeared to be limited to monetary contributions. This distance between mother and son became one of the bittersweet aspects of Sophie's otherwise dazzling life. After decades of captivating audiences with her wit, humor, and powerful voice, Sophie's departure from the stage and from life itself was as theatrical and memorable as her career. On the day of her passing, she summoned her nurse with a unique request. She demanded her hanky and wig, symbols of her iconic stage presence. Draped in these familiar pieces of her costume, Sophie recited a few lines from one of her acts. In a moment that seemed almost scripted, she peacefully drifted away, bringing her incredible journey to a fitting close. Sophie Tucker's legacy is multifaceted. She will forever be remembered as the last of the Red Hot Mamas, a pioneer who carved her own path in an industry that often sought to limit her. Yet she was also widely regarded as the first lady of show business, a trailblazer whose influence extended far beyond her songs and performances. Her life story is a testament to resilience, creativity, and the power of embracing one's uniqueness to overcome challenges and achieve greatness. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed learning about Sophie Tucker's incredible journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. See you in the next video.